Okay. All right. So as I was saying, I was about introducing our second speaker for the day in the person of Ronald Maria. Ronald Maria also is an MVP, Microsoft MVP, and a cloud architect as well. He currently contributes to the architecture and development of modern Azure-based systems at Immediate, if I got the name right.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes. Okay. So he is a .NET API developer, and he handles that product, .NET API development. So it is an honor to introduce a great expert like that. The community is very much happy to host you, Ronald, and thank you for honoring our invite. Ronald, take over.
Cool. Thank you so much. Just share my screen. Cool. Cool. So hi everyone. My name is Ronald Maria. I'm a Microsoft Azure MVP from South Africa. I work at a company called Immediate, builds .NET applications for our own platform, as well as those of our customers. So I'm also a cloud solutions architect. Next week, I'll be starting a new job at Hollywood Bets. I'll be a DevOps technical lead. So yeah, next week will be my last at Immediate. For today's talk, I want to talk about Azure SDK for .NET and what that is and how we use it and why we would use it. So before we get into the demo, just an overview of what is Azure Resource Manager. So Azure Resource Manager is the control plane of Azure itself. So anything that we need to deploy or manage within our Azure environment is done through Azure Resource Manager. So whether we need to deploy a web application or deploy a virtual machine, that's all done through Azure Resource Manager. And there's many ways that we interact with ARM. And one of the ways is that we'd use the Azure Portal. We would go into portal.azure.com. We would create a new resource or scale up a resource if we need to. Another way is that we could use Azure PowerShell and write PowerShell commands to automate that in some way. Same with the Azure CLI and REST clients as well. So anything that we need to manage within Azure is exposed through an API on Azure side, and we can interact with that. But as well as client applications like Azure Portal, PowerShell, CLI, there's also SDKs that we can use within our .NET applications to automate whatever we need. And we'll look at the .NET version of the SDKs in a minute. So why not just use the Azure Portal? Because we can just go to the Azure Portal and create new resources and do whatever we need. And why do we need an SDK for it? One of the reasons is that it's time consuming, in the sense that clicking on the portal takes time. You'd have to fill in the many details in that form kind of way. We'll have a look at what it takes to create something on the portal. But point number one is it is time consuming. If we need to create 10 virtual machines, we would have to repeat the same steps 10 times in a row and fill in the same amount of information each time. That leads to point number two. It's prone to user errors. Because it's a human doing this on a portal, we would misconfigure something maybe 1 time out of 10 or maybe more. Point number 3 is that when we're using the Azure Portal, any new features that Azure develops, it gets added to their API first, and the Azure Portal only gets to use those features up to 180 days after that feature is available on the REST API, which means that the SDK already supports that new feature, but the Azure Portal doesn't. So if you want to utilize a new feature that Azure develops, then you would have to use the REST API directly if you want to take advantage of that. So most of the part of this presentation is a demo. So we'll look at the Azure Portal, and we'll look at some .NET code as well. Let me just go to the Azure Portal first. So if we need to create, let's say, a storage account, for example, we would go to the Azure Portal. We would find where the storage accounts. We'll click Create. And we would need to fill in this information, which subscription we would need, which resource group we need to deploy to, give it an account name, choose the region. I'm just going to say South Africa. And choose the redundancy that we would need. And if we needed to create 10 different storage accounts, then we would need to repeat this process that many times. The example that I'm going to use in the demo is that we're going to build a very simple clone of something like Dropbox, where a user can come to our platform and say they want a storage account available that they can use. It's going to be very basic, but at least it'll serve as a inspiration to build something similar to that. And we would just create the storage account. And that'll go and deploy it for us. And the same thing can be done for other resources as well. So if we needed a Windows server, we would go on the portal, click Create, and we would fill in all the information that we would need. If we needed 10 of the exact same virtual machines, then we would need to ensure that we fill in this form the exact same way 10 different times. And that leads to the point earlier where it's prone to user errors. If I had to do this 10 different times, I'm probably going to mess up at least one time. So what is Azure SDK for .NET? There is a GitHub page for it. .NET SDK, if I can find it, that one. And I'll send the link to you, Ernest, as well, so you can post it on the chat. So this is an open source project by Microsoft. And if we look at the SDK folder, there's a list of all the different SDKs for every service that's within Azure. For example, if you want to look at DNS, for example, and we would use this. We can look at the test as an example. So the tests describe how the SDK is used, and we can see that. Let's find the exact part of the code that deploys stuff. For example, here, there's a helper that creates private zones. So we can do all of this through .NET and not through the Azure Portal. So if we wanted to create a private zone, we can do it through .NET code. And I'll show exactly how we would do that for storage accounts as an example, and virtual machines. So let's go to Visual Studio, and I have this blank application. It's an Azure Functions project that does nothing at the moment. So we're going to add some NuGet packages and add a functions application. So let's go ahead and create a Azure Function application, and I'm just going to call it functions. And it's going to be a queue trigger. So what I aim to achieve with this function is that whenever I drop a message on a queue, this function will pick it up and deploy a storage account with that details that I provide on that queue message. I'm just going to give the connection string a name and the queue name as well, a name. That connection string I'll need to add to my local settings. Connection, and I'm just going to say use development storage. Goes through. So what use development storage allows you to do is that it allows you to have a local emulated storage account where I can have queues defined on my machine, not on Azure. So I can locally test queue storage. Yeah, I can locally test queue storage on my environment without deploying it anywhere yet. Clear that as well. So if we go back to the functions, we'll see that there is a queue trigger and we have a connection as well. So if we have to run this, and we can at least test that this queue triggers. And we see that it's running, and we would have a function called queue trigger. And if we have to go here and add a message called Ronald and add that to the queue, and if we go back here, we'll see that the function processed successfully and the queue message is output to the console. So this doesn't do much, but at least it will allow you to initially test a function app. So the message that I want to put onto the queue is going to be a custom object, just not a text string. So we're going to create a new class that will hold that storage detail. And we're going to use some of the details that we provided on the form in the portal. So if you go back to how we would create a storage account. So programmatically, we would, if we wanted to deploy just a storage account and we want to make something customizable, then I'll add that to the queue item itself. So the name of the storage account can be customized. The region can be customized, as well as we'll just keep it to that too. I'll just give it a name of the storage account and give the location as well, make that customizable. Then from that queue item, I would just deserialize that object to storage detail. So that detail is available in the function, and I can use that to deploy the storage account. So next, before we move any further with the code, some insight into how the authentication will work. So on Azure, there's Active Directory, and the way that our application connects to Azure is through a concept called app registrations. So we would create an app registration for our application. And that, I'm just going to call it app. It can be any name. And this app acts like any other user in our organization. We can grant it privileges to deploy storage accounts, and that's what we would do. So for this app, we'll create a secret for it as well. I'm just going to give that secret a name. It can be anything, and it expires within 6 months. And I'm just going to copy that before it gets lost. So this application that I've created, it has an ID and it has a secret, and that we want to store in Key Vault. So we wouldn't want our application to store that information. We would have our application read that from Key Vault, and that allows us to be more secure in how we handle secrets and configuration. So you'll notice that in the application there's no secrets at all that's stored. And I have a Key Vault which is in my app resource group, and we would store that credentials there. That's not the Key Vault. And this is the Key Vault. And in Key Vault, there's the settings for secrets that we can generate and add new ones. And I'm going to manually add one called Credential ID. Or let me just add the secret first. And I'm going to add that secret and create that. And let me get the ID. So the app that I created has a application ID, that client ID, and that as well we'll store that in Key Vault. Let me go back to resource groups, app, and Key Vault, and add that ID as well here. And paste that. So this application that I've created in Active Directory, it's just a blank application, so it has no privileges to our environment at the moment. So if we go back to resource groups, I have a resource group called storage accounts, which I can add access control to it. So if I go to add a role assignment, I can grant that application access to deploy to the storage account. So if you look at the existing roles, there's a role called storage account contributor. And I can grant that app that I created the permissions to be a contributor on storage accounts in this specific resource group. So I can also limit what privileges this application can do. I wouldn't grant it owner access on the entire subscription, because if it happens that the client ID and secret gets compromised, then anyone with that credentials can do whatever they want in the subscription, which isn't ideal. So in code, why is this popping up? Cool. So in our code, we would first need to get the credential ID and secret from Key Vault. Now, the way that we interact with Key Vault is through a concept called managed service identity. Managed service identity is located in tools options, and we would find that in Azure Service Authentication. And you defined what account it's using. So it's using my Gmail account. And if we go to Key Vault, you'll see that I already have permissions on Key Vault. And if you look at access policies, so access policies define what permissions people have. So even if this code gets onto GitHub and someone else pulls this code, they won't have access to my Key Vault because I define what user it's using. So it uses the permissions that you specify. If I have to change this account, my application won't work anymore because that new user won't have permissions on Key Vault. So we would first need a service token, which represents that managed service identity. I might be missing some NuGet packages. Let me add that. I don't think I've added that. So we would need to add some NuGet packages first. One is to use the managed service identity. The second is for Key Vault to interact with Key Vault. And the third is for interacting with the storage management APIs. And we would locate that for app authentication. And we would need this one called Microsoft.azure.service app authentication. We'll install that. And we would need Key Vault. And the Key Vault one is Microsoft.azure.keyvault. And accept that. And the last one is storage management. And the storage management is Microsoft.azure.management.storage. And install that as well. So now I would get some better IntelliSense. Azure Service Token Provider. And I would need a Key Vault client. And that's a new Key Vault client. And that I would need to get a token as well. Key Vault client. And I'm missing some includes import references and authentication callback. And that authentication callback I will get from here and Key Vault token callback. So once I have that Key Vault client, I can now get the credential ID and secret is equal to Key Vault client, and I can get get the secret from Key Vault. Let's go back to Key Vault and get the unique name for accessing this. So there's a concept called a secret identifier, which if someone has permissions, then they can read whatever is inside the secret. But this, if you give anyone, they won't be able to access it because they don't have permissions on Key Vault. I'll only need this part of it. You could use the entire one if you have more than one version. So you can specify what version you want to reference. But since we only have one version, I can just use the base URL. And I'll use the same one for the secret as well, not just the ID. So this is an async method. So I will need to await that, and get the value of that. And that's giving an error because the method needs to be async as well. And import that reference. And let me just copy that and change this to secret. And that'll be credential secret. So now that I have the ID and the secret, I can then create a client credential. Which will allow me to use that ID and secret to act as the app account that I created in Active Directory. And I'm going to say new client credential, and IntelliSense helps me with that as well. Then I would need an authentication context. So the authentication context will allow me to act as that user, but to a certain resource. So we will add that as well. So that authentication context is to the management API, new authentication context, and we would give it an authority. That authority is management.azure.com, and we would need to provide the tenant ID as well for my subscription. If you go to Active Directory, and we'll find the tenant ID here. And that's the authentication context. And then we will need the access token that we would use for interacting with the management API. Authentication context and acquire token. So that acquire token is to a specific resource, and we would use HTTPS and let me see if I can. Sorry. That's to log in at windows.net. Let me see if I just got that too right. Yeah. I just realized that I swapped these two around. So the management one goes here and login.windows.net goes on top. And the ID is here. All of this is detailed in the SDK. So in the on the GitHub repo, there's that test as well that's included with the SDK, and it shows you how to set up all this base code. most of this can be abstracted in a certain part of your application that's reused. And we'll see that the access token can be used for the storage SDK as well as the SDK for managing compute resources as well. And we would pass in that client credential here. So once we have that access token, we can now use the management client for storage accounts. Storage management client. And we would use the SDK for that. And instead of having access token, we would just say new token credentials and then pass the access token. And for that, I think I would need to await this as well. So let me just do that. Await that and access token. Yeah. Cool. And as part of the management client, we would need to provide what subscription ID is being used for this management client, and that as well we can get from the portal. And get my sponsorship one and copy that subscription ID and use that here. Now, once we have all the base code configured, now comes the fun part where we actually deploy the storage account. So we would use the management client and we can then have a list of storage accounts within the subscription, and we can create a new storage account that we want. The parameters that is used is a resource group name. So I have a resource group called storage accounts. And what's the account name? The account name is found in the object that I put into my queue. So that will be the name. And the parameters that I want to use. So there's a whole lot of parameters that can be configured. Let me just await this as well. So the underlines go away. And we can have a look at what can be configured, and it's everything within the storage account. Let me just expand that. So anything that you can create or configure on the portal can be manipulated on within code. For example, if I want to change what SKU or what tags are being used or what SaaS policies. So I have granular ability to change whatever I want, similar to what I have on the Azure portal, but I can do it through code where it's now in a repeatable form where I can do this as many times as I want, and I'll get the exact same output. So all of this is not needed by default. I would just need a few items. So SKU is needed. So I'll just say new SKU. And if it happens that you forget what a certain parameter means, you can hit F12 and it'll summarize what the possible values are. So for example, I want a standard LRS, and that I would need to add into the name. So new SKU and just say is name. The kind and dot storage v2, The location I have in the detail dot location, and I don't need that. I don't need tags. Yeah, I think all of this is not needed. Or, well, you can provide it if you need to, but yeah. And let me just verify what is kind. Yeah, so the possible values are storage v2, or blob storage. Yeah, so now we can go ahead and run this. And if everything is configured properly, it would work. So just going back to this object is just name and location. And sometimes it just doesn't output something, so I just run it again. Yeah. Cool. So I have my queue trigger here, and I have my queue that is empty. And now I can put a JSON object for name. And the name of the storage account I want to create is MUGGH01. And the location that I want it deployed into is, let's say, West Europe. And if we refresh, we'll see that the queue item is gone, which means that the function is executing. And we'll see that it's dequeued as well. And within a few seconds, up to 30 seconds, depending on how fast storage accounts is deployed in general, it'll take that same amount of time. And if we go back to the portal and we go to resource groups and storage accounts, I'll see that the 001, which I created earlier, and I'm not sure exactly how long it'll take, but it executed. And the portal does take a while to refresh. Notice it's like a few seconds, but it takes a while for the portal cache to clear, but it will show up soon. Yeah, there's it here. So there's the storage account, the name that I provided, as well as the location that I specified. So whatever configuration I added in code, that exact same thing will apply. For example, it's locally redundant as well, which I specified. The account kind as well. So I can create as many storage accounts as I want. I wish I just copied that other part, but let's do it again. Name, let's give it a name, MUGH002. That'll be that, and the location. And I'm just going to say this one is South Africa North. I'm just going to copy that. What's another one? North Europe. Oh, and that's going to be, I spelled North Europe wrong. So that will probably fail. Yeah, but we can add some validation to make sure that the input that we receive is from valid options. Yeah, so we can have a look at that as well. So you'll see that the list of available regions must be from this list. So I spelled north wrong, so that's failing. But the others would be created. The second one in South Africa North is created, and the fourth one will be as well. Some real world examples of how it's used or how I think it's used. There's a platform called A Cloud Guru, and I would assume that they use it in a similar way. They have a feature called Playground. In Playground, you can create your own cloud servers. You can create a new server, give it a distribution that you want, select which region and what size, and you can create a server as well. So in this demo, we actually built a very simple version of it where we can create a storage account from just giving some parameters, but we can do the exact same thing for the compute as well. So if you wanted to build a platform like a Cloud Guru or just the backend of it, then it's quite similar to what we are doing now. And every SDK is in its own NuGet package. So there's a compute management as well. And if you look at compute management, just install that. And once that's installed, we can reuse this part. But instead of storage management client, we'll have compute management client, and that'll be compute. And import that using statement. So with the compute management client, we can manage a whole lot of compute, for example, virtual machines, availability sets. We look at virtual machines and we can create as well, create or update virtual machines. And we can give it a resource group name. We can give it a VM name and some parameters for the virtual machine. And there's a whole lot of parameters as well for this. I don't remember all of it, but IntelliSense helps you locate what properties are settable. For example, location can be configured, the plan, the hardware profile, the storage profile of the virtual machine. So all of this location, the name of it, is exactly what you would use here. So we can give it a software profile of Ubuntu machines, which is here, like the hardware profile, the storage profile. OS profile can be defined as well for like Linux VMs or Windows. And yeah, we can build out the same infrastructure that a Cloud Guru has. We would just need a fancy front end and yeah. And we can configure virtual machines the same way as storage accounts. Oh, yeah, I think that's it for the demo. And we saw that how storage accounts are created. The fourth one should be here by now. Yeah, fourth one in North Europe with the right location here. The third one failed. But yeah, some real world examples of how I used it, not just like a Cloud Guru. So we have a project at Media, which is a small part of what we build. But the way that we use it is that, so at Media, the platform that we're building is for communities and radio stations. So radio stations particularly, there's a whole bunch of Azure resources that needs to be created. on demand. So whenever we add a new radio tenant, then we would need some Azure resources created as well. And I have this background worker here, Azure Automation Functions. So whenever we add a radio tenant, there's some resources that we create, and that resources are, for example, create IoT devices or create availability tests. And that applies to, if you go to the Azure Portal and sign in with my media account. Let's go to all resources. That's the one. So in application insights, there's a option for availability where we can define availability tests on URLs. So whenever we add a radio tenant, we also serve out the live stream as well. So we have to ensure that the availability of their live stream is up all the time. So whenever it does go down, we need to be aware of it. So we add this availability test whenever a new tenant is created. But the problem is that someone has to go and click add and configure stuff. But all of this is now automated, and we can see how that is done. So that's done using the application insights management client, similar to how we have storage account management client and virtual machines as well. But we have application insights management, and we define a new web test, and we create or update that. So similar code, just a different way of creating a web test. And we define all this information in code so that if we had to add 10 radio stations at once, this will be done automatically in the background. Yeah, I think that's it for the demo and for the session as well. If there are any questions.
Yes, it's been a wonderful section. Wow, the inside out of it, the application, you've related as to how you use it. I mean, it's very insightful. It's been very insightful. Attendees, we are at the question section. So feel free, unmute, get interactive. We want to take as many questions as we can. We still have time, about 20 minutes to take questions and scenarios, whichever scenario you want to ask question about, feel free, the mic is yours and ask your question. So we are waiting for your questions. Okay, so Joseph, I think, yes, the mic is yours.
Okay, so how do you handle authentication if the account has already enabled multi-factor authentication?
So how would I handle authentication for?
Multi-factor authentication.
Multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
So multi-factor authentication is usually for actual users. So this is authenticating my my application to act on behalf of some account that I've created on Active Directory. So it's not an actual user that has a phone that they have. It's like a user, but in an automated way. So there's no MFA with app registrations. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, good.
So it's just a way of two systems interacting with each other, but using permissions defined in Active Directory.
Okay.
So if I needed like this support tool to have access to Azure, then I would create that permissions on Active Directory.
Okay, understood.
Yeah. Let's have a look at, while I'm thinking of it, let me just get rid of this compute stuff. And let me just go back to my command line and add that and just say git demo and push that to the repo. I would need to do a pull first before I push. Cool. The link to the repo as well, I'll send Ernest. But we'll see that 25 seconds ago, I updated stuff. There's also GitHub Actions on this. So when this action triggers, I will actually deploy it to a web app that I have. So I have a web app for the function app. And at the moment, there shouldn't be anything in it. If I go to functions, there's nothing here. But let me just go to configuration, because I've added that new connection string to queue storage, or it's called queue connection. And let me just get the storage account that's here. And I'm going to create a new one called and paste that. So it'll use the same storage account that the function app is using. And the main idea of what I want to show is, let's wait for this settings to be updated. So within my Visual Studio, I showed in the tools options, it has my account listed. But when we deploy it, it's not going to be using my account at all. So there's a settings for identity where you can enable system assigned managed identity. And we can enable that. So that app is being registered and it's called MUGGH app. And if this app wants to communicate with Key Vault, then I'll need to specify that access as well. Just wait for this to be registered. So it's registering that app in Active Directory. And if we go to the Key Vault, which is yeah. So in Key Vault has access policies, and at the moment, it's just my own account that has access, but I can add access to any other, for example, key management and key and secret management, define what permissions I want to grant access to, and select the service principal. And that's the service principal of that MUGGH app, and grant that. So this function app can access the secrets in Key Vault because I said it can. So anyone else with this code won't be able to access Key Vault as well, because it's only this specific web app that can. No one else can deploy this code in their own web app and think they can access Key Vault. Because each web app comes with its own identity. And let's see if it did deploy. So that's finished. And you can log into Azure, build the project, and deploy it to the function app. And we can go to the function app now. And in functions, should have the Q trigger. Yeah, the functions is the name of the class or the name of my function. And if we go to that storage account, which is in configuration, let me just close this up. So the storage account that's being used is that account name. And let's find it. So that's the storage account that's used, and we can go to queues and we can create a new queue called items. And can I add items to the queue on the portal? Yeah, I can. And I can, let's see, that one. Let's deploy storage account 5, and I'm running out of ideas for new locations. East US. Add that. And if I refresh, that should be gone. Yeah, so the function I picked it up and it will deploy it. Yeah. It'll take a while. But yeah, if there are any other questions in the meantime, then you can ask as well. We do have insights as well, if anything does go wrong. Whenever you deploy a new application to a function app, Azure does delay the insights by a few minutes. So if something does go wrong only after 5 minutes, then only you'll be able to see the executions and if there are any errors. But yeah, if you go to monitor, we should be able to see though that there was actually an execution. And we see that there was. So there was a failed execution. We just need to find out why it failed. But yeah, there are logs as well to make sure that does application insights show anything. So there was some errors here. Yeah. In the meantime, is there any questions?
Okay, so I like these sections because they are very practical. Is there any other question from the attendees? I'm seeing Jonah sharing her screen. Yes, so I would want to again ask if there are any other questions to for Ronald to answer. Attendees, the platform is yours now. You still have the experts around. You can ask as many questions as you want. Okay. So we are still waiting for your questions. Else we would. Ronald, do you have the? Do you still want to check the error thing, or we should?
Yeah. The insights did show up now.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me share my screen again.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. Yeah. So Azure does delay the logs for a bit. So we see that there's an exception for Key Vault. Key Vault error exception. Name is forbidden. And we see that for some reason the app can't access Key Vault. Which means that it's probably because I noticed this as well. I'm not sure if you all noticed it, but in Key Vault, when I added the access policies, yeah, this is one of the weird things about Azure. You can see that, you'll remember I added the access policy, but there is a save button that I keep forgetting to click. So if you go to key management, select the service principal, and if we go to MUGGH and we click on the app, we select, we add it. What I keep forgetting is that I need to click save. Then only, yeah. So the save button is important as well. So let's go back to the storage account. Go to storage accounts, and I think it is this one here. 847, yeah, that's one. And go to queues, items, and add a message, and let's give it a number 8 and make it West US. Yeah. And that should work now. Yeah, there's a lot of gotchas on Azure as you get experience with using the portal and getting familiar. You'll know how to automate some of the tasks that you would usually do by hand. Yeah, go to resource groups, storage accounts, and soon there'll be a 8. If that was the only problem with it running. Hopefully it shows up. But yeah, that's the only reason I can think of that it won't deploy. Unless my subscription don't have access to that region.
Yeah, I mean.
Because there is a limit to what I can do on my sponsorship.
Yes. Sometimes, yes, it do happen. So, yes, I must say that the site, the section has been very hands-on, practical. I mean, you don't get this anywhere, and I mean, it's very cool to, I mean, face some of these things so that the attendees have the real, I mean, scenario. I mean, kind of hands-on. They see how to even go about troubleshooting issues like such. So I mean, it's all part. It makes the sections very interactive, and I'm enjoying it. Seeing how you are going about it, troubleshooting, reading logs and insight. So it's very cool, and I'm sure they are enjoying it as well.
Yeah. Well, it's the same error as well. Again, I'm not really sure.
Okay.
Exactly why. So there's some permissions with the function app and keyboard.
Yeah. It's been really a wonderful section, Ronald. We can't say thank you enough. I've really enjoyed the section, and I'm sure my attendees have also really enjoyed the section. Yes. So if there are no more questions, I would like to say on behalf of the community, community lead as well, I'd like to say a big thank you. Thank you for sharing your weekend with us, and we really appreciate it. Attendees, I don't want to cut your questions, so if there are questions you want to ask, kindly go ahead. Just raise your hands so that I give you the platform. But aside that, I would like to say a big thank you. Please, can you display your social media handles, your blog, so that attendees pick it up?
I can do that. Yeah. So I have my Twitter handle is Ronald Maria on Twitter, and LinkedIn is the same, just Ronald Maria. You should be able to find me as well. Yeah, my blog is kind of empty, but I have it ronaldmaria.dev. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I have some attendees messaging me. I think those that are joining with external email, I think they are having a little challenge with the chat box. So I would entreat you to share your slide with me. So I will share it up on our social media as well, if that is okay with you.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much, Ronald. It's been a pleasure hosting you. The team are all happy here. I would like to say a big thank you and hope to see you more in our events.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Yes. Okay, so before I move to our next speaker, I think it will be fair enough to say some big shout out to our sponsors of this event. In fact, we are currently at the London College of International Business Studies here in Accra, Ghana campus, and it is such an awesome campus. I think that you have to visit us in person next time. For those who couldn't make it in person, you really have to visit us in person. They run short courses also, such as brand strategy, business system analysis, fundamentals of data analysis, fundamentals of project management, introduction to business administration, logistics management, introduction to IT management, operations management, strategic management, supply chain management, and financial management. And these are short courses with a duration of 10 to 12 weeks. I'm betting my whole life on their way of teaching. I've had the privilege to go through their system, and their campus is designed with ultra modern facilities. So you should try and visit them. When we get to our 10 minutes break, I'll display their logo for you to see the school. It's an awesome surrounding and environment. So yes, if you've not heard of them, I mean, you should go and find out. They run all your business courses and all your project management courses. So now we would move to our third speaker in the person of Anderson. Yes,